probably think you've seen it all. But trust me, what I'm about to tell you isn't some edited jump scare compilation or a staged prank. This is real. This is El Paso, Texas. And this is the story of Lincoln High, a place where the hallways don't just echo with memories, but with something else entirely. My name's James, and the girl you can just about see in the corner of this blurry night vision footage is Isabella. We thought we were just doing what any curious, maybe slightly stupid, teenagers do, exploring an old, supposedly haunted place. We thought it would be a laugh. We were so wrong. Before I dive into the absolute nightmare we lived through, do me a solid, okay? If this story chills you to the bone, and I promise it will hit that like button, seriously, smash it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to know if we ever figure out what happened, or if it ever follows us. And please, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think, if you've ever had an experience like this. We need to know we're not alone in this. Now, turn off the lights, crank up the volume, and whatever you do, don't look over your shoulder. Lincoln High isn't just old, it's ancient by El Paso standards. Built in the 1920s, with those high arched windows and crumbling brickwork. It shut down maybe 15 years ago, deemed unsafe, but everyone knew the real reason was the stories. Whispers of a student, Sarah, who vanished without a trace back in '87, and a janitor who swore he saw her ghost wandering the empty halls just before it closed. Isabella, always drawn to the macabre, practically dragged me there. Come on, James. Everyone says it's super haunted. Think of the content. We could be the ones to finally capture something, she'd said, her eyes gleaming with that dangerous curiosity of hers. I was skeptical, of course. I'm the practical one. But it was a Friday night. We were bored. And the idea of breaking into a derelict school under the vast, inky El Paso sky did have a certain dark appeal. We parked Isabella's beat-up sedan a few blocks away, near some quiet residential streets, and slipped through a broken section of the fence at the back of the property. The air was thick and still, not a breath of wind, which was unusual for El Paso. As we approached the main building, the silence was oppressive. No crickets, no distant traffic noise, just the crunch of our sneakers on dead leaves. The moon, a sliver barely cut through the gloom. The main entrance was boarded up, but we found a propped open window on the ground floor, leading into what looked like an old art classroom. Dust motes danced in the faint moonlight filtering through grimy panes as we climbed inside. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of decay and old paper. Even then, a shiver ran down my spine, and it wasn't from the cooler night air inside. Okay. Operation Ghost Hunt is a go, Isabella whispered, pulling out her phone, already recording. I had my camcorder, the one on night vision, its green glow making everything look alien and sickly. We started with the classrooms, empty desks, overturned, chairs, the faint outlines of long erased In one room, a single child's drawing of a stick figure holding hands with a monstrous, shadowy figure was still tacked to a bulletin board. We both stared at it for a moment, an unsettling feeling coiling in my gut. Then we heard it. A faint, scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across concrete, coming from down the hall. We froze. What was that? Isabella whispered, her voice barely audible. Probably rats, I tried to reassure her, though my voice cracked slightly. We decided to head towards the source, because, you know, brilliant ideas in horror movies. The sound led us to the old library. The library was a labyrinth of empty shelves, their dusty spines long gone. The scraping was louder here, accompanied by a soft, rhythmic thump thump thump. It sounded like something was being dragged. My heart was hammering against my ribs. We crept around a tall, overturned bookshelf, and that's when we saw it. A janitor's cart, the kind with space for trash bags and mops, was slowly, deliberately being pulled across the floor. There was no one there, no strings, no trickery. It just moved. The wheels squealed, the metal frames scraped, and the mop bucket clanked with each slow, laborious drag. It moved maybe 10 feet across the aisle, then stopped. Just stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Isabella let out a choked gasp, clutching my arm so tight, I thought her nails would pierce my skin. "Did you see that, James? Did you get that on camera?" I just nodded, speechless, my camera still aimed, the green light shaking uncontrollably. We backed away, slowly at first, then almost running, stumbling through the dark hallways. We had to get out. But as soon as we reached the main corridor, facing the boarded-up entrance, the lights flickered on. Not all of them, just a few, sporadically, down the long, dark hallway. It was enough to cast long, dancing shadows that stretched and contorted into grotesque shapes. Then, a voice, a whisper, came from everywhere and nowhere. It was soft, like air escaping a punctured tire, but it filled the cavernous space. "You shouldn't be here," Isabella screamed, a raw guttural sound that echoed through the silence. My blood ran cold. The lights still flickered, like a dying heartbeat. And then we saw it at the very end of the hallway, near the old gymnasium doors. A figure began to coalesce. It was faint, shimmering, like heat haze off El Paso asphalt, but undeniably human-shaped, slender, almost childlike. It seemed to be facing away from us at first, shoulders slumped. Then, slowly, it turned. It had no discernible features, just an absence where a face should be, a swirling vortex of shadow. But we felt its eyes on us, a profound sense of sorrow and ancient rage. As it fully faced us, the lights around it intensified, then abruptly died, plunging the hall into absolute darkness, except for one light. The emergency exit sign above us, a red glow, and reflected in the glass of that exit sign behind us was the same shadowy figure. It was right there. I shoved Isabella forward, yelling, "Run, don't look back." We sprinted blindly through the darkness, our feet pounding against the linoleum. We didn't know which way we were going, just away. The whispers multiplied, becoming a chorus of mournful sighs and faint, distant laughter that seemed to chase us. We burst through a door, finding ourselves in the old theater auditorium. Dust covers draped over everything, making the rows of seats look like ghostly figures themselves. As we tried to find an exit, the heavy velvet stage curtains at the front began to sway, slowly at first, then violently, as if a powerful wind was tearing through them, despite the sealed-off building. The sound was like a roaring wind, then a tearing sound, and finally, a guttural scream that shook the very foundations of the building. It wasn't human. It was full of agony and unadulterated fury. We scrambled over seats, Isabella crying, me just pushing her along, adrenaline pumping through my veins. We finally found a side door, marked stage exit, kicked it open, and spilled out into the starless El Paso night. We ran for our lives, not stopping until we were back in Isabella's car, tearing down the street, leaving a cloud of dust and the cursed high school behind us. We never went back. We don't talk about it much, even to each other. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the desert wind howls outside, I still hear that low, scraping sound. And I swear, sometimes, when I glance into a dark window pane, I see a flicker, a momentary swirl of shadow where my own reflection should be. And Isabella, she sleeps with a nightlight on now, every single night. Says she can still feel something cold touching her when she's alone. We think it was Sarah, the vanished girl, or maybe something far older, something that just resides there, drawing energy from the lingering sorrow and fear. Because even though we left the school, I'm not entirely sure it left us. And sometimes, El Paso, even under its bright sunshine, feels like it's hiding more than just desert. It feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for the shadows to lengthen. So, you tell me, what was it? Was it a ghost? Something else entirely? Have you ever felt that lingering dread after an encounter? Let me know in the comments. And if you're ever near Lincoln High in El Paso, don't go in. Trust me, some secrets are better left undisturbed. Because some things, once awakened, never truly go back to sleep. It's a chilling warning. You know that feeling when the school bell rings and everyone floods out, leaving behind empty hallways and echoing silence. Imagine that silence, stretching on for hours. Imagine the sun setting over Phoenix, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples. But inside your high school, a different kind of darkness settles. Not just the absence of light, but an actual presence. Before we dive into the nightmare Lucas experienced, if you're brave enough to hear more tales like this, hit that like button right now. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and in the comments, tell me, what's the creepiest legend your school has? I'm genuinely curious if anyone else has a school as active as Lucas's. Lucas wasn't your typical Phoenix teenager. While everyone else was hitting the pool or cruising Central Avenue, Lucas spent his evenings helping his dad, Mr. Miller, the night custodian at Northwood High. Yeah, Northwood. The same school with the busted AC in the West Wing, the perpetually overflowing fountain in the courtyard, and a whisper of a history that went back way further than its 1970s construction date. Lucas didn't mind it at first. Empty classrooms meant quiet studying. The echoing gym was perfect for bouncing a basketball after hours. And the weird smell in the drama club's costume room was just ... An old school smell, right? He'd help his dad empty bins, sweep gym floors, and occasionally replace a flickering fluorescent bulb. Normal stuff. Until it WASN. Single quotes T. It started subtly, like a pebble dropped in a vast empty pool. A cold spot in the hallway on an 80-degree night. A distant creak from the second floor when Lucas was sure his dad was on the first. The kind of things you brush off. Just the building settling, his dad would mumble, wiping sweat from his brow. But Lucas began to notice patterns. The creaks always seemed to follow him. The cold spots lingered. One Tuesday night, Lucas was in the library, reshelving some books his dad had found scattered on tables. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and something else, something vaguely metallic. He heard a soft rustle from the next aisle. "Dad." He called out, his voice a little too loud in the silence. No answer. He walked around the tall shelves, his sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. Nothing, just rows upon rows of silent books. The only sound was the distant hum of a failing refrigerator in the staff lounge. He turned back to the cart he was working from. And that's when he saw it. A heavy, leather-bound book, one he'd just put back, lay open on the cart. Its pages fanned out as if someone had just dropped it. The title, The Legends of the Salt River Valley, and it was open to a page detailing local tragedies and unsolved disappearances surrounding the very land Northwood High was built on. A shiver, colder than any air conditioning, snaked up his spine. He slammed the book shut and shoved it back onto the shelf, his heart thumping. The incidents grew bolder. One night, while sweeping the art room, Lucas noticed a charcoal drawing on an easel. It was of a girl, mid-scream, her eyes wide and hollow. He didn't remember seeing it before. He looked away for a second to adjust his broom, and when he looked back, the eyes on the drawing seemed to follow him, their black voids unnervingly fixed on his every move. He quickly left, claiming he needed to get more dustpan bags, but really, he just needed to escape those watchful eyes. A few nights later, his dad was down in the boiler room, fixing a stubborn pipe. Lucas was in charge of locking up the auditorium. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, plunging the stage into darkness. He was about to flip the main light switch when he heard it, a faint, mournful hum, like a forgotten choir singing a discordant, sorrowful tune. It was coming from the stage. He paused, heart hammering against his ribs. It sounded ... sad, and then a single spotlight flickered on, illuminating the center of the stage. Nothing was there, just the empty space. But the humming intensified, joined by a soft, rhythmic thumping, like a struggle, or someone desperately trying to break through something. Lucas froze, unable to move. A chair, propped against a prop table in the wings, scraped loudly across the floor, as if someone had violently kicked it. Then the spotlight went out, plunging the stage back into oppressive darkness, and the humming abruptly stopped. Lucas didn't wait. He sprinted out of the auditorium, locking the door behind him with trembling hands. Mr. Miller dismissed it all as overactive imagination or old building noises. But Lucas knew. He started dreading the nights, especially when his dad sent him into the West Wing. This wing housed the oldest classrooms, the science labs with their dusty skeletons, and the infamous abandoned photography darkroom. This was where the air was always heavy, always cold, always smelled faintly of something metallic, like old blood and rust. One night, Lucas had to retrieve a forgotten cleaning cart from a classroom deep in the West Wing. The fluorescent lights above flickered erratically, casting jumpy shadows that seemed to stretch and contort into impossible shapes. He passed an empty classroom, and from the corner of his eye, he saw it a reflection in the window. Not of himself, but of a figure standing behind him. Tall, gaunt, with long, stringy hair that seemed to writhe. No face, just a dark void where it should be. He whipped around. Nothing, just the empty hallway. His breath hitched in his throat. He forced himself to walk on, his skin prickling. He reached the classroom, grabbed the cart, and turned to leave. As he wheeled it towards the door, he heard a distinct whisper, right beside his ear, so close. He felt a cold puff of air. "You shouldn't be here." Lucas dropped the cart, its wheels screeching as it clattered against the wall. He stumbled backward, his eyes scanning the empty classroom. The whisper seemed to hang in the air, a phantom echo. Then, a desk chair in the corner slowly, almost deliberately, scraped across the floor, as if someone had just stood up from it. Panic seized him. He bolted. He didn't look back, didn't stop until he burst out of the West Wing, gasping into the relative sanity of the main hallway. His dad found him a few minutes later, pale and trembling. "What is it, son? You look like you've seen a ghost." Lucas just shook his head, unable to form words. How could he explain the cold void in the window? The whisper, the chair moving on its own. His dad just sighed, attributing it to Lucas needing more sleep. But the school wasn't done with Lucas. The next night, his dad was called away on an emergency at another school. Lucas was alone. He tried to convince himself that everything he'd experienced was just his mind playing tricks, amplified by the solitude. He kept himself busy, focusing on the mundane tasks, trying to ignore the constant sense of being watched. He was emptying trash in the West Wing again, a task he now dreaded more than anything. He passed the abandoned darkroom, its door always locked, always emitting a faint, musty smell. Tonight, however, the door was ajar, just a sliver, but enough to see the impenetrable darkness within. A strange, almost melodious humming emanated from inside, similar to the one he heard in the auditorium, but deeper, more resonant, like a forgotten chant. He told himself to walk away. Just walk away. But something pulled him, an inexplicable curiosity mixed with a primal fear. His hand, as if compelled, slowly pushed the door open, revealing a room utterly consumed by shadow. No windows, just the oppressive blackness that seemed to absorb the flashlight beam he timidly shined in. And then he saw it, or rather, felt it. A presence, not just a cold spot, but an overwhelming weight, a suffocating dread that crushed the air from his lungs. And from the deepest part of the room, he heard it again. His name, Lucas... It was a voice that was both young and ancient, full of an unspeakable sorrow and a chilling hunger. It echoed, not just in the room, but inside his head. As the voice faded, the air grew ice cold, and then, from the blackness, to pinpricks of light, like eyes, slowly ignited. They weren't reflecting light, they were emitting it, burning embers in the impenetrable void. And from beside them, a faint, translucent hand, long and thin, slowly rose from the floor. It reached out, not towards him, but towards the wall, and began to painstakingly, chillingly, scratch something into the plaster. A sequence of symbols, ancient and foreign, glowed faintly as they were etched. As the last symbol appeared, a guttural, wet gurgle filled the room, a sound so utterly devoid of humanity, so full of suffering, that Lucas's mind recoiled. He didn't scream, he couldn't. He just backed away, slowly at first, then turned and ran faster than he ever had in his life. He burst out of the school, leaving the lights on, the doors unlocked. He didn't care. He just ran under the vast, indifferent phoenix sky. The image of those glowing eyes and that scratching hand burned into his mind. Lucas never went back to Northwood High at night. His dad eventually got a new night assistant, chalking Lucas's erratic behavior up to teenage angst. But Lucas knows. He sees it in the way the shadows stretch a little too long at dusk, in the way a cold draft can suddenly chill a summer night. He hears it in the quiet hum of an empty room, and he feels it in the inexplicable dread that sometimes settles over him. You ever walk into an old building, maybe a forgotten corner of your school, and just feel a chill? Not the kind from the AC, but something deeper, something that whispers across your skin, even when there's no breeze. That's what we're talking about today. Because some places, they don't just hold history. They hold on to things, things that refuse to let go. Today, we're diving deep into a real one, straight from the heart of Dallas, Texas. A story that'll make you think twice about staying late at school, or even walking past it after dark. And hey, if you're brave enough to stick with me through this, if you feel that shiver down your spine, do me a solid. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more terrifying tales, and tell me in the comments below if you've ever had a creepy school experience. Seriously, I want to hear your stories. Noah and Olivia were inseparable. Best friends since kindergarten, they shared everything. Stupid inside jokes, late-night cram sessions fueled by questionable energy drinks, and an unhealthy obsession with local urban legends. Dallas might be all glitz and cowboys on the surface, but dig a little deeper, and you find the kind of shadows that cling to the old bricks, the forgotten alleyways, and yes, even the very institutions meant to shape young minds. Their current fixation, Northwood Academy. Not their school, thank goodness, but an imposing Gothic revival structure on the edge of the historic district. Built in the 1920s, Northwood had a reputation, whispered in hushed tones between high schoolers across the city. They said the old West Wing, long abandoned and boarded off after a structural incident decades ago, was haunted. Not by a friendly ghost, not by a playful poltergeist, but by something malevolent, something that hated. The legend was vague, as legends often are, but revolved around a student from the 1950s, a girl named Eleanor Vance. Brilliant, artistic, but socially isolated. She vanished one night from the West Wing after a late night. Art class never found. The school claimed she ran away. The students, they whispered she never left. Another Friday night, another deep dive into despair. Olivia joked, nudging Noah's shoulder as they stood across the street from Northwood. The iron gates were formidable, the stone facade bathed in the sickly yellow glow of a distant street lamp as dusk bled into night. A full moon hung like a watchful eye, occasionally peeking through the sparse clouds. Noah, ever the pragmatist, adjusted his backpack. Look, Liv, it's a boarded-up building. Probably rats, maybe a stray raccoon, that's it. Oh really? Then why'd you bring the high-powered flashlight and your dad's old toolkit for the boards? Olivia raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on her lips. She knew him too well. Beneath Noah's skepticism was a thrill-seeker, just like her. They'd found a weak spot in the back fencing, hidden by overgrown ivy. And then, a small, unsecured window in the West Wing, low enough to reach. This was it. No turning back. Would you have gone in, or would you have left? The chilling tales echoing in your mind. Inside, the air was thick, musty, and cold. A profound stillness hung heavy, broken only by the crunch of ancient dust beneath their sneakers and the distant hum of the city. Their flashlights cut through the absolute darkness, revealing peeling wallpaper, cracked plaster, and rows of empty, silent classrooms. The floorboards groaned with every step, sounding like tormented sighs. Okay, this is something, Noah admitted, his voice barely a whisper. The rational part of him was fighting a losing battle against the prickling sensation on his neck. Olivia shone her light down a long, narrow hallway. They say Eleanor's locker is still here. Number 312. They moved deeper, guided by the faint glow of emergency exit signs that must have been solar-powered. The further they went, the colder it got. Not just a temperature drop, but a bone-deep cold. The kind that feels like someone's breathing icy air directly onto your skin. Suddenly, a distant scraping noise. Scratch, Scratch, scratch. They froze. Did you hear that? Noah hissed. Olivia nodded, her hand instinctively gripping his arm. The sound was faint but distinct, like fingernails dragging across a blackboard. It seemed to be coming from one of the classrooms. Noah, ever the investigator, pulled Olivia along. Which one? They crept to the nearest classroom door. It was slightly ajar. Noah pushed it open with the tip of his shoe. The scraping stopped. The room was filled with old, overturned desks. A large blackboard covered one wall, and on it, scrawled in what looked like dried, reddish-brown pigment, were lines, just lines. Hundreds of them, overlapping, frantic, completely filling the board. Like someone had been trying to draw something, or maybe just erase their own sanity. What is that? Olivia breathed, her voice trembling. Then they heard it, a whisper, so faint, so indistinct, it could have been the wind, but it wasn't. It was right beside Noah's ear. Leave. Noah stumbled back, bumping into Olivia. Did you hear that? Olivia's eyes were wide. Yeah, I did. Let's go, now. If you were Noah and Olivia, would you run screaming, or would your curiosity force you to push on? But Noah, stubborn as ever, had to see. He swept his flashlight across the room, past the chaotic lines, to where the teacher's desk would have been, and lying on the floor, half hidden under a broken chair, was an old, leather-bound sketchbook. Its pages were brittle, yellowed. He knelt, picked it up with trembling hands, and flipped it open. The first few pages were beautiful, vivid charcoal sketches of natural landscapes, flowers, portraits, clearly the work of a talented artist. But as he turned the pages, the art grew darker. The landscapes became twisted, the flowers withered, the faces contorted in agony. And then, the last few pages were filled with the same frantic, overlapping lines from the blackboard. Only here, they seemed to be trying to form something. A face, a screaming face, trapped within the chaos. As he stared, a cold gust of wind swept through the room, though all the windows were shut and boarded. The sketchbook pages began to flutter, faster and faster, as if an invisible hand was flipping through them. And then, the book slammed shut with a sickening thud. A small, dry, brown something fell out onto the floor. It looked like ... a dried flower petal, but it was shriveled, almost black, and felt unnervingly stiff, like old leather. That's when the lights flickered. Not just the faint emergency lights they'd seen, but the old, long-dead fluorescents in the ceiling. They buzzed, then flashed, bathing the room in an icering, momentary strobe. In one of those flashes, they saw it. Standing in the doorway where they had just entered was a figure, tall, gaunt, indistinct in the pulsing light. It seemed to be wearing a faded, old-fashioned dress, and as the lights flickered again, they saw its face, or rather, the absence of one. Just a blurred, featureless void where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. Only the long, black hair, falling across its shoulders, gave it a semblance of humanity. Then, the whispers started again. Louder now. Not just one voice, but many, overlapping, frantic, like 1,000 secrets being told at once, all around. Them, gone, empty, alone, never leave, stay. Noah and Olivia didn't hesitate. They screamed. A raw, primal sound of pure terror. They dropped everything, the sketchbook, the flashlight, and bolted. They ran, scrambling over overturned desks, sliding on the dusty floor, the frantic whispers echoing behind them. closer now. They could feel the icy cold breath on their heels. The floorboards weren't just groaning. They felt like they were actively trying to trip them, shifts and buckles appearing out of nowhere. They burst out of the classroom, stumbling down the hallway, the chaotic lines from the blackboard now seeming to writhe and stretch across the walls in their periphery. The shadowy figure was there, at the end of the hall. Then suddenly right in front of them, blocking their path. What's your instinct? Fight or flight? And how do you escape when the path is blocked? Noah, fueled by adrenaline, grabbed a loose piece of timber from a decaying wall and swung it wildly. It passed straight through the figure. No impact. It was a phantom, but the sheer terror of it was palpable. Olivia, thinking fast, spotted a fire escape door they'd missed earlier, mostly obscured by a collapsed bookshelf. Noah, this way. They crashed through the door, the old metal shrieking on its hinges. They burst onto the rusting fire escape, clattering down the steps, not daring to look back at the monstrous school. The whispers followed them, sounding like wind tearing through shattered glass. You can't leave. You're part of us now. They didn't stop until they were back on the street, gasping for breath, hearts hammering against their ribs. They didn't speak a word, just ran through the cool Dallas night. Away from Northwood Academy, away from the screaming shadows, they made it out. They swore they'd never go back. And for a while, things seemed normal, but nights are longer now. For Noah and Olivia, they've both said they still hear things. Faint whispers, only when they're alone. A strange, insistent scratching. And sometimes, when they're together, they catch each other looking at their hands. Because on their fingertips, etched subtly into the skin, almost invisible unless you really look, are faint, reddish-brown lines, like dried pigment. Like the frantic, chaotic lines from Eleanor Vance's blackboard. They say some places don't just hold on to things, they transfer them. And sometimes, what you bring out of the darkness brings a piece of the darkness out with you. Dim the lights if you can. Maybe pull your blanket a little tighter. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story. It's a confession. And by the time I'm done, you'll be checking over your shoulder. I promise you that. Before we dive into the chilling truth of what happened at Northwood High. Yeah, my Northwood High. Right here in Fogist, San Francisco. Do me a favor. Hit that like button. Seriously, it helps more people find these tales. And if you're not already, subscribe and ring that notification bell. You don't want to miss what comes next. Believe me, don't Northwood High, right? The sprawling brick behemoth nestled in the Sunset District, overlooking the Pacific. Most people just see an old building, maybe a little run down, but steeped in history. What they don't see, what I saw, is the way the fog seems to cling to it just a little tighter, the way the old bell tower seems to loom a little darker against the twilight sky. It's got that classic San Francisco vibe, beautiful, iconic, and hiding secrets older than its foundations. My name's Bobby, and this whole nightmare started because of a stupid history project. We had to pick a local urban legend and either debunk it or find evidence. Being the brilliant me I am, I chose Northwood High's own whispered legend, the story of the guardian of room 301. Supposedly, an old, forgotten classroom in the school's oldest, long-abandoned West Wing was haunted by the spirit of a student who vanished, or worse, died there decades ago. Sounds like typical high school ghost fodder, right? That's what I thought too. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and misty, just like every other San Francisco day. Classes had just let out, and the usual stampede of students pushing their way out the main doors had dwindled to a trickle. I lingered, pretending to pack up my locker, but really, I was waiting for the halls to empty, waiting for the silence to settle. My history teacher, Mr. Harrison, was a stickler for immersion, and he'd mentioned that the school caretaker, old Mr. Henderson, usually left the West Wing unlocked for equipment storage until around 5 p.m. My plan was simple: sneak in, snap some pics of the fabled room 301, maybe record some eerie silence, and then laugh about how dumb the legend was. What would you do if you had the chance to step into a real-life creepypasta? Would you be brave enough or dumb enough, like I was? The West Wing felt different the moment I stepped across the threshold. It wasn't just dusty, it was cold. A deep, penetrating chill that went beyond the usual San Francisco dampness. Main school was a mosaic of student chatter and fluorescent hums, but here it was like stepping into a vacuum. Every creak of the old wooden floors echoed. Every breath I took seemed to reverberate back at me. The air itself felt thick, heavy, like it was pressing down on my chest. The windows, grimy with years of undisturbed grime, let in only slivers of the anemic daylight, casting long, distorted shadows that danced as I moved. I pulled out my phone, flashlight on, heart beginning to thump a little harder against my ribs. Room numbers were faded, peeling off the doors. 305, 303, and then there it was. Room 301. The door was slightly ajar, just a sliver of darkness visible within. Was it unlocked, or was someone else here? "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding ridiculously small, swallowed by the oppressive silence. No answer. Only the faintest, almost imperceptible whisper seemed to brush against my ears. It sounded like ... a sigh. Or was it just the old pipes groaning? Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room inside was a nightmare of peeling paint and broken furniture. Desks were overturned, chairs stacked haphazardly in corners, all covered in a thick blanket of dust. But in the center of the room, there was one desk, positioned oddly. Facing the blackboard, it looked almost ... clean, as if someone had wiped it down recently. Not just that, but there was a single, flickering fluorescent light tube above it, sputtering erratically, casting the desk in a sickly, pulsing glow. My eyes landed on something carved into the ancient wood of that desk. A name, Eleanor Vance. The letters weren't just scratched, they looked almost burned into the surface. As I leaned closer, a shiver traced its way down my spine. The air around the desk felt even colder, much colder. Underneath the desk, tucked away in a small, hidden compartment I almost missed, I found it, a small, leather-bound journal. It was old, brittle, its pages yellowed and smelling of mildew and something else, ... something metallic, like old blood. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was neat, elegant at first, but grew increasingly frantic, messy. The entries started innocuously enough. Another day at Northwood, so boring. Then they shifted. The whispers are getting louder. I feel watched, even when I'm alone. This school, ... it's changing. Then a specific entry caught my eye, dated decades ago. They don't believe me. This building, it has a life. It watches. It waits. The entries became more fragmented, chaotic, trapped. It knows. It's always been here. The last entry wasn't words at all, just a frantic, dark scribble, a spiderweb of desperate lines, ending with a single, chilling phrase. It knows. It's always been here. As I read that last line, a sharp clang echoed from behind me. The door to room 301, which I'd left ajar, had slammed shut with a sickening thud. The faint light from the hallway was gone. The only illumination now was the sputtering fluorescent light above Eleanor's desk, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe on the walls. My heart hammered. I spun around, fumbling for the doorknob. It was locked, solid, unyielding. I pounded on it, yelling, "Hello, Mr. Henderson. Is anyone out there?" My voice was hoarse, desperate. Then, the fluorescent light above me sputtered one last time and died, plunging the room into absolute darkness. That's when I felt it. A cold, damp breath on the back of my neck, and a whisper, so close, so intimate, it felt like it was inside my head. It wasn't a growl, not a scream, but a soft, sibilant sound, like dry leaves scuttling across pavement, except it was forming a word. My name, Bobby. I froze. Every hair on my body stood on end. The air around me dropped to an impossible temperature, a frigid, bone-aching cold that felt like it was trying to steal the breath from my lungs. Then I heard it, a dragging sound, heavy, slow, like something incredibly heavy being pulled across the dusty floor, coming from the corner of the room, slowly, deliberately towards me. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. My skin crawled. I could feel its presence, closer now, looming, even though I saw nothing in the impenetrable blackness. My eyes were wide, useless. I scrambled backward, tripping over something unseen, falling hard onto the grimy floor. The journal slipped from my nerveless fingers, skittering away into the darkness. As my eyes adjusted to the void, a faint, sickly green glow began to emanate from Eleanor Vance's desk. The name, Eleanor Vance, written on the desk, was now radiating a faint, eerie luminescence. And beneath it, new words had appeared, scratched violently into the wood, as if by spectral claws. Words that hadn't been there seconds before. Words that pulsed with the same green light, making my stomach knot with ice. "You're next." That was it. Pure, unadulterated terror. The dragging sound intensified, faster now, right behind me. I didn't think, didn't breathe. I just reacted. I scrambled up, blindly throwing myself at the door, kicking, shoulder barging, driven by a primal need to escape. The old wood groaned under my assault. Suddenly, with a splintering crack, the rotten frame gave way, and I stumbled through, falling, into the equally dark and cold hallway. I scrambled to my feet, not daring to look back, and sprinted down the long, desolate corridor, my footsteps echoing like gunshots. The whispers were no longer in my ear, but all around me, a cacophony of distorted, overlapping voices, growing louder, closer. The dragging sound was right behind me, too, rhythmic and horrifying. I didn't look. I just ran, fueled by adrenaline and the sheer, quendicide, overwhelming terror that something ancient and malevolent was hunting me. I burst through the main doors of the school, gulping down the cool, damp San Francisco air, not stopping until I was halfway down the block, drenched in cold sweat, shaking uncontrollably. I never looked back. I never went back into that West Wing, not even for my history project. I just told Mr. Harrison I couldn't find anything. The wing was closed off. He seemed disappointed, but he let it slide. But here's the thing, the part that keeps me up at night. The part that makes me wonder if I really escaped. Sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and heavy, and Northwood High is swallowed by the mist, I hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper on the wind. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch a glimpse of movement in the old, broken windows of room 301, like a pale face, watching, waiting. What was it that Eleanor Vance was writing about? Was it a ghost? Was it the school itself? And what do you think happened to Eleanor? Was she truly a victim, or just the first in a long line? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And be careful out there, because some places, some stories, they don't just stay in the past. They linger, and they watch. Ever walk into a perfectly normal building, a place full of laughter and everyday chatter, but feel this icy dread creep up your spine? Like the air itself is holding its breath, waiting. Imagine that feeling, not for a moment, but for entire hours, days, weeks. Imagine the shadows stretching a little too long, the silence growing a little too deep. And the whispers, oh, the whispers. They say shadows have memories. But what if those memories aren't just lingering echoes, but active, hungry things, born from something truly terrible? What if they live in the very walls of your school, waiting for you? Before we plunge headfirst into the chilling depths of what Johan and Lisa experienced, if you're brave enough to stick around, do me a solid, hit that like button right now. Seriously, give it a tap. And if you want more stories that'll make you double check your locks, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. After you hear this, you're gonna want to share your own creepiest school stories, so drop them in the comments below. Have you ever felt like you weren't alone in your school after hours? Let me know. It started subtly, as these things always do. Johan and Lisa weren't the type to believe in ghosts. They were grounded, practical Denver teens. Johan, with his perpetually messy brown hair and a sarcastic quip for every situation. And Lisa, calm, observant, always sketching in her worn notebook. They were inseparable, bound by a shared love for obscure indie bands and late-night D&D sessions. The rumors about the old library annex at Evergreen Peak had always been just that, rumors. A forgotten wing, sealed off after a structural incident back in the 80s, full of dusty books and supposedly something else. Kids whispered about cold spots, flickering lights, and sounds, sometimes a faint scratching, sometimes a mournful hum. Most dismissed it as the building settling or bored janitors. But then came the History Project. Mrs. Davies, bless her heart, assigned them a deep dive into Evergreen Peak's past, a segment on the school's original design, its various expansions, its forgotten spaces. And that's when Lisa, with her knack for digging, stumbled upon an old blueprint. And there it was, the library annex, labeled as Section C7, Archives and Special Collections, with a handwritten note scrawled over it, sealed -1987. Do not enter. Why not? Lisa wondered aloud to Johan, tracing the faded ink with her finger. What happened in '87? Nobody knew. The school archives were strangely silent on that specific year. No records of an accident, no reason for the permanent sealing of an entire wing. Just a blank space, a missing puzzle piece. And that, my friends, is when curiosity crossed the line into obsession. One unusually quiet Thursday afternoon, After everyone else had cleared out, Johann and Lisa found themselves lingering. They'd been granted special permission by Mrs. Davies to access some old yearbook archives in the main library, but their real target was just beyond the staff-only door at the very back, rumored to lead to a forgotten hallway that connected to the annex. Have you ever felt that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, like someone's staring even though you're alone? Johann felt it the moment they slipped past the staff door, the heavy oak swinging shut behind them with a definitive thump. The air immediately felt heavier, colder. Dust motes danced in the lone sliver of light filtering through a grimy window. At the end of the hall, the smell was ancient. Mildew, old paper, and something else, something metallic, like rust and stale blood. It was probably just the old pipes, right? They moved slowly, flashlights from their phones cutting through the gloom. Empty classrooms lined the hall, their doors all firmly shut, yet somehow not quite silent. Johann swore he heard a faint scratching from one, like fingernails dragging across wood. Lisa, ever practical, just tightened her grip on her phone. Then they found it. A heavy metal-plated door, unlike any others. No handle, just a small, rusted padlock. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, but next to it, tucked into a loose brick, was an old, tarnished skeleton key. What would you do? Would you turn around, knowing this was probably a terrible idea, or would your curiosity overwhelm your fear? Johann, ever the reckless one, snatched the key. No guts, no glory, right? He whispered, a nervous tremor in his voice. Lisa, despite herself, nodded. This was it. The lock groaned as Johann turned the key. A high-pitched, almost human-like screech echoed from within the annex as the bolt slid free. The sound vibrated through the floor, chilling them to the bone. The door creaked open just an inch, revealing utter blackness, a darkness that seemed to absorb the light from their phone flashlights. Okay, Lisa breathed. Maybe we just peek inside. They pushed the door open wider. The air inside was freezing, instantly fogging their breath. The space was vast, filled with towering, skeletal metal shelves, all draped in thick, ancient cobwebs. Every surface was coated in a fine, powdery dust. This wasn't just an old library. It felt like a tomb. Suddenly, a book slid off a shelf, hitting the floor with a muffled thump. Not fell, slid, slowly, deliberately. Johann jumped back, almost tripping over his own feet. Lisa instinctively brought her phone light to bear on the spot. Nothing, just the book, lying face down on the dusty concrete. Wind. Johann offered, his voice a little too high, then a whisper, faint, ethereal, like a breath across the back of their necks. It sounded like a name. Sarah. They both froze. Sarah, who was Sarah? As they moved deeper, the whispers grew more frequent, more desperate. They heard faint shuffling sounds from between the shelves, like someone dragging their feet. Sometimes, a low, guttural growl that resonated in their chests. Johann's flashlight flickered violently, then died. Lisa, your phone, he hissed. But Lisa was staring, transfixed, at the far wall. There, amidst the dust and grime, a single outline, a dark stain, almost like a shadow burned into the wall itself, in the shape of a person. And above it, scrawled in what looked like faded red paint, was a single word: help. Cold, wet dread pooled in Johann's stomach. This wasn't just spooky, this was wrong. A faint, almost imperceptible light began to glow from behind one of the towering shelves. A soft, pulsating blue. It drew them in, against their better judgment. As they rounded the corner, they saw it. An old, wooden desk, pristine amidst the filth, and on it, a single open diary. The blue light emanated from the pages. Lisa, her hands trembling, reached for it. As her fingers brushed the yellowed paper, a chilling voice, clear as a bell, but filled with unimaginable sorrow, echoed through the annex. It was a young girl's voice. They locked me in. They said I was trouble. No one ever came. The blue light intensified, creating a distorted, wavering figure behind the desk. It was transparent, shimmering, but undeniably human. A girl with long dark hair, slumped over, her head resting on the diary. Her skin was a sickly grey, her eyes twin pits of despair. Johann screamed. A raw primal sound ripped from his throat. The figure slowly lifted its head, its eyes, devoid of spirit, locking onto theirs. It reached out a spectral hand, its fingers long, skeletal, aimed directly at them. The cold in the room plummeted, snatching the breath from their lungs. "You found me," the voice whispered, closer now, right beside them. "You're just like them. You'll leave me here too." A terrifying, suffocating pressure slammed into Johann, pushing him against the shelves. He felt icy fingers rake against his arm, leaving a burning sensation. Lisa, however, wasn't affected. She stared at the ghost girl, tears welling in her eyes. "We won't leave you," Lisa cried out, her voice cracking. "Who are you?" The spectral figure's head tilted, its empty gaze fixed on Lisa. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched its lips. "Sarah." Then, a sudden, violent shudder ripped through the entire annex. Books exploded from shelves, dust motes swirled into a blizzard, and the blue light pulsed erratically. The air was filled with a cacophony of screams, whispers, and the sound of something tearing. The ghost of Sarah looked at them, then past them, her spectral eyes widening in terror. "They're coming for me," she shrieked, her voice twisting into a tormented wail. The entire wall behind them seemed to ripple, distort, and then something began to push through it. Not just a shadowy figure, but a grotesque, multi-limbed mass of darkness, eyes like embers flickering within its formless body. It was an older, deeper evil, something that had been attracted by Sarah's restless energy, drawn to the school's forgotten corners. It lunged, not for Johann or Lisa, but for the terrified ghost of Sarah. Johann and Lisa didn't think, they ran. They scrambled out of the annex, past the metal door, stumbling through the dark hallway. They didn't stop until they burst out of the staff entrance, gasping for breath, limbs shaking, into the comforting, if still somewhat eerie, emptiness of the main school corridor. They never went back to the old annex, not even for their history project. Mrs. Davies was surprisingly understanding when they turned in a very basic report. Johann and Lisa never spoke about what they saw that day. Not really. How could they? Who would believe them? But sometimes, when the wind howls just so around Evergreen Peak High, they swear they can still hear it. A faint, mournful hum. And sometimes, late at night, when the school is utterly silent, the message notification on their phones will light up. A single, unsent text message, typed out by someone, but never actually delivered.